Hello and welcome back. My name is Sage, and today I'm going to tell you about more of the strangest cryptids I could find from every state in the US. You all really liked the last episode, so I'm sorry this one took so long to come out. It's just a different style of editing than I'm used to. There's some really cool ones in this episode, so with that aside, I'm excited to continue. Hawaii is a really interesting state with tons of unique folklore, but my favorite is definitely the Night Marchers. They're said to be the lingering spirits of ancient Hawaiian warriors, essentially guardians of the chief or king. The Night Marchers emerge from the ocean on holidays that honor certain gods and march to old battlegrounds, floating in the air, never leaving a trace of their presence. Witnesses describe hearing chanting, drums, and the sound of conch shell horns being blown, and the scent of death in their wake. It is believed that observing, defying, or otherwise trying to hinder the marchers results in death, and should you find yourself in their path, you must show obedience by laying face down and hoping they pass over you. Along with many potatoes, Idaho is home to a fair few aquatic cryptids, such as the Charlie, which is essentially the Idahoan equivalent of the Loch Ness Monster. There's also the Bear Lake Monster, which has a much more creative description attached. It was first seen in 1868, with local newspapers publishing multiple reports of the creature, although its appearance varied wildly in each account. Some claim it was a giant alligator with red eyes, others say it was a snake-like creature, also similar to the Loch Ness Monster. The last known sighting was in 2002, where a fisherman describes it swimming under his boat and lifting it with his neck. He also said it had red eyes, which is at least somewhat consistent with the other reports, unlike some that claim it was more like a manatee. Should I mention that the original guy who reported it in the 1860s said he made it up? Nah, that probably isn't important. Oh, now this is a weird one. It was a nice spring night in Enfield, Iowa, 1973. A man called Henry McDaniel suddenly heard scratching at his front door, so he looks outside to see what it was. What McDaniel recounts seeing is one of the weirdest creatures I've ever heard of, and I've been reading about cryptids for like a month now. The thing at his door had 3 dog-like legs, a disproportionately small humanoid body with 2 arms, and giant pinkish eyes. McDaniel, understandably, shot at it and managed to hit it, but it didn't seem to faze the monster. It apparently hissed at him like a cat and bounded away like a kangaroo, covering about 50 feet in 3 hops. It was seen an additional time walking along some railroad tracks near his house, this time keeping its distance. A search party for the creature was unsuccessful, but McDaniel was quoted as saying, "If they do find it, they'll find more than one, and they won't be from this planet, I'll tell you that." I chose a pretty famous one for Indiana, mostly because my mom likes these guys. Pukwudgies are small humanoids of Native American folklore. They live in a few eastern states, including Indiana. They are said to have the ability to shapeshift and are able to vanish at will. They were apparently once friendly with humans, but turned against us at some point and now use their powers to lure people to their death. The most common form for a Pukwudgie to take is that of a small person with some features of a porcupine, such as spines on their back. Some aren't quite as malicious, but they are known to follow people who annoy them from time to time, staying invisible and causing minor annoyances. I'm surprised my mom likes these guys because they sound like dealing with annoying little kids, and I would have figured she had enough of that. Iowa is apparently mostly known for having a lot of corn, and the population of hogs outnumbering the people, but it also has a pretty cool local monster. First reported by a small group of people in 1903, the Van Meter monster is a flying creature of vaguely humanoid stature. It also had a glowing horn on its head, bat-like wings, and the sight of it caused a small panic. A business owner in Van Meter, U.G. Griffin, attempted to shoot it down with a shotgun, but it didn't seem to affect it much. It was seen multiple times in different places throughout the town, and people shot at it each time, despite it never doing anything outright hostile. It was eventually hunted to an abandoned mine to be dealt with for good, where it began to scream. To quote an issue of the Des Moines Daily News from the time, "The noise opened up again, as though Satan and a regiment of imps were coming forth for battle." Eventually it came out of the mine, accompanied by a second monster, where they were both fired upon until they went back in and were never seen again. This one's kind of sad to me. It never did anything wrong, and people just attacked it and its mate, presumably. And now we'll never know what it was. Kansas is another state with fairly uninteresting cryptids. so I'll have to fall back on something well known here. The Dogman has been increasingly popular in the last couple years, and I think it has to do with how funny the pictures of it are. Although it was most famously spotted in Michigan, Dogman sightings have been reported in many states. It's frequently described as a bipedal canine creature ranging from 7 to 8 feet tall, essentially a night form lichen rock. The Dogman is also said to make a sound like the howl of a wolf combined with a human scream, and if it's anything like I imagine, that's gotta be pretty scary to hear. There are very few accounts of Dogmen actually attacking anyone or doing anything outright harmful, but I'd still never want to encounter anything like it out at night. While it's most famous for fried chicken and horse racing, Kentucky has a pretty good selection of unexplained creatures. From Mothman sightings to devil monkeys and lake monsters, Kentucky is pretty stacked. For brevity's sake though, I'd like to talk about the Hopkinsville Goblins, our second entity in this series to have arrived via spacecraft. The ship was spotted in 1955 by one Billy Ray Taylor. He claims he saw it landing in a small gorge on his property. Taylor tried to tell the adults inside his house, but was laughed at until the family dog became agitated by something outside. Armed with rifles, 2 of the men in the house went outside to investigate. They were met by an archetypal little green man-style alien with large eyes, green skin, and long spindly fingers. Despite the alien apparently holding its hands up as a sign of peace, they shot at it and it backflipped away and ran into the woods. The aliens kept showing up in the windows of the house, and the family would shoot at them, apparently never hitting them. The aliens went away in the morning and have never been spotted since. I've been excited to get to Louisiana, even though this cryptid is actually not very interesting. But the name of this entry is like half the reason I started making these videos. I just wanted an excuse to say the word grunch a bunch of times. The grunch is the name used to refer to a group of small human-like creatures that live in eastern New Orleans. They're sometimes described as albino dwarves and are malformed due to inbreeding. The grunch will venture out from their hideaways to steal and eat livestock from farmers. They're very similar to the melonheads from the last video. Unfortunately, there's not much information about either of them, so I don't get to say grunch as many times as I wish I could. Maine is yet another state with a limited cryptid selection, but the strangest in my opinion is the specter moose. The moose has been spotted near Bangor, Maine since the 1890s and is one of the area's most mysterious legends. Hunters that seek the specter moose claim that it's 15 feet tall, has antlers 10 feet wide, and probably weighs over 2,000 pounds. Sightings are very rare and it's barely been seen since the 90s, so information is pretty scarce. I'm pretty sure there's also a Far Cry mission where you hunt a ghost moose, but I can't confirm it's a direct reference. As a Marylander myself, we've got a few cryptids to claim as our own. There's a couple different goatmen in the US, and one of them lives here. The snallygaster allegedly visits once in a while, and our state is probably most famous for the Chesapeake Bay, which if the stories are to be believed, is home to an aquatic monster known as Chessie. It was first seen in the 1930s, and is described as a sort of sea serpent about 12 feet long, with a head similar to a horse's. There are a lot of people who chalk up all Chessie sightings to manatees that wandered too far from their normal waters, which has happened a few times, but most accounts of the creature don't match up with a manatee's features. There have been many more sightings over the years, but nothing that actually confirms its existence. But with how gross the bay is, I don't doubt that there could be some gross mutated creature swimming around in there. Massachusetts has a fairly famous cryptid in the form of the Dover Demon, but I think it's a little too normal for the purposes of this series, so instead I'm going to talk about the so-called Beast of Truro. In 1981, residents of Truro, Massachusetts began reporting pets and livestock going missing. The bodies of some of the animals were found slightly north of town, quote, ripped by deep claw marks, unquote. The small number of witnesses that actually saw the culprit going after their animals describe a specific creature. Hey, this is like a week later, and writing this section made me so annoyed at how stupid some people are that I had to take a break. The witnesses tell stories of a, quote, large furry creature they didn't recognize. The most detailed account comes from William and Marcia Medeiros. They claim that the creature had a long rope-like tail, was about knee height, and looked to weigh about 80 pounds. Now those of you who have lived anywhere where mountain lions exist are probably pretty sure you know what the Beast of Truro might be. While there's not a breeding population of mountain lions in Massachusetts, there have been multiple confirmed sightings of them over the past few years. So yeah, there was just a random mountain lion eating chickens in Massachusetts, and people thought it was an unknown predatory animal roaming the streets. I don't know much about Michigan, so learning about the cryptids here was pretty cool. One I found pretty interesting was a creature of Native American legend called the Mishipeshu, or the Great Lynx. Interestingly, an aquatic creature, the lynx is usually depicted with the head and paws of a large cat, antlers like a deer, and a tail like a serpent covered in scales. It's said to hide in the deepest part of the lakes in Michigan and protect copper deposits around Lake Superior. This one has been a part of legend since the 1600s at least. It's one of the coolest looking cryptids I've ever read about. Upon first hearing about it, I assumed the Minnesota Iceman would be something akin to Bigfoot or a Yeti, but I was very wrong. The legend actually begins in the 60s, where a frozen ape-like creature was shown off as an attraction at various sideshows. The carnival promoter, Frank Hansen, claimed it was the corpse of a humanoid creature originally hunted in Siberia. Images of the Iceman showed that it really did resemble a chimpanzee or some sort of primate. A few cryptozoologists of relatively notable status studied the creature and believed it to be genuine. But I don't exactly know if I trust the word of people famous in what is essentially a field of pseudoscience. And I say this as someone who obviously likes cryptids. But the point stands, there was something frozen in a block of ice being carted around with the carnival, and we don't know exactly what it was. I've been excited to get to this one because alien stories are always funny. This one takes place in 1973 on the Pascagoula River in Mississippi. Two men, Charles Hickinson and Calvin Parker Jr., were fishing on the river when they noticed a floating blue orb in the sky that was slowly moving towards them. It kept coming closer until it was only about 100 feet away, hovering over the water. According to the men, it began making a droning noise and a door opened on the side of the spherical craft and three beings made their way out. They were pretty similar in description to the Flatwoods monster, but with more cone-shaped heads. Hickinson and Parker claim that the aliens floated towards them and carried them into the craft to examine them, but they don't go into much detail. The aliens must have found them boring because they dropped them back to the ground and left shortly after. Missouri actually has a couple of cool cryptids, but one in specific gives me the opportunity to reference one of my favorite YouTubers and part of my inspiration for making this series. In honor of Wendigoon, I'll tell you about the Giants of Missouri. Large humanoid skeletons are a surprisingly common supernatural occurrence, so much so that you can even find one in Red Dead Redemption 2. This one was discovered in a coal mine in Moberly, and was unusually large even for this type of discovery. The femur alone was about 4.5 feet long, meaning that whatever this giant was must have been at least 3 times as large as a normal human. Despite promises of later excavations and a more detailed study of the skeleton, no more information was ever released, and considering this happened in the 1880s, it seems unlikely we'll ever hear more. Finally, the last M state. I didn't realize there were this many. Montana is one of the least populated states in the US, and it's huge, so there's plenty of space for unknown animals to hide. One such animal being the Flathead Lake monster. Flathead Lake is massive, almost as big as Loch Ness in Scotland. Like most of the cryptids I've covered, it was first seen in the late 1800s, by one James Kerr, the captain of a fishing boat. The boat approached what they originally believed to be a log, but upon getting closer the crew realized it was an animal of some sort. It was similar to a whale, smaller obviously, but it was hard to get a good look at. Over the years, many large creatures of varying descriptions have been spotted in the waters of the lake, and the sheer variance in the reports doesn't lend the story any credibility. Some say it's like an eel, some say it's a serpent like Nessie, and others still just say it's a large sturgeon. I think cryptid stories are much more believable when multiple people with no relation to each other give similar descriptions. But things like this, where people report tons of different things over such a long period of time, don't have a lot of merit. Now this is a nice weird one. It's probably because Nebraska is in the middle of nowhere and people are bored, but in the 50s a businessman started seeing giant kangaroos a few miles out of Grand Island, which is an ironic name considering Nebraska's location. The businessman, Charles Wetzel, alleged that the kangaroo was unusually large and could cover 10 feet in a single jump. Make no mistake, kangaroos have escaped zoos and started small populations in places they shouldn't be, but nobody's managed to verify Wetzel's claims about unusually athletic ones in Nebraska of all places. Another case of giant human-like skeletons took place in Lovelock, Nevada. The story goes that a skull very similar to a Neanderthal's was found in Lovelock Cave in 1967. As people probably know, Neanderthals only existed in Eurasia and Africa, so remains of one in North America should be impossible. Native Americans in the area, however, had stories of barbarians whose appearance matched that of the skull, who would kill them for food. The natives apparently managed to wipe them out, and this skull was one of the only remaining traces of their existence. The skull remains unidentified to my knowledge, though, if it isn't a fake. New Hampshire is a very small state, but it's covered in forests, making it the perfect place for wood devils. They're tall, thin humanoids, like the hide-behind, that live in the deepest parts of the woods. They're known to stand incredibly still, blending in with the trees. If spotted, they can run incredibly fast. Wood devils are seemingly not hostile, and reports mostly describe them watching from a distance and hiding when noticed. This one I can definitely imagine myself being afraid of. For those of you who don't know, I'm really afraid of things like wendigos and skinwalkers, so a tall creepy figure lurking just out of sight in the woods is like the perfect combination of things to scare me. Alright, so it might seem like a bit of a cop-out to talk about the Jersey Devil in the New Jersey section, but this series is about strange cryptids, and it definitely meets that description. The story of the Jersey Devil resides very much in the supernatural and in superstition. In the 1700s, a woman cursed her 13th child to be born a devil. A normal child at birth, it quickly grew to resemble a goat, killing the midwife and flying with bat-like wings out of the chimney. Since then, it's been seen all over the state, with remarkably similar descriptions considering the time frame. It's been nearly 300 years, and people still see it skulking around in the night. It's also been known to suck the blood of livestock and attack random people after dark. Despite how outlandish the story is and how long it's been without definitive proof, the Jersey Devil is a staple of cryptozoology culture in the state of New Jersey itself. As a side note, I read a story where the mother of the Jersey Devil was apparently horrified when it came out and became like a demon thing, but I mean, she literally asked for it, so I don't know what her deal was. Well hey, there we go. That's 20 more down. I'm really sorry it took so long for me to get this one out. I was pretty busy with work and took a vacation to see the FNAF movie with my best friend, which is why it took so long. The support on the last video was amazing, and I hope you enjoyed this one as well. With that said, thank you so much for watching, and I promise part 3 won't take as long.
What the fuck is that? Bigfoot. Oh man, look at him.